Join me right now, back on the show, is rising UFC welterweight, Alex Morono. What's going on, Alex?
Nothing much, man. Just got home from training a few minutes ago, and we're actually getting hammered with another storm here in Houston. But thankfully, the Woodlands, my area, didn't get it too bad. And I know South Houston's getting pretty flooded again. Man, I'm just hoping everyone's coming out of this one okay.
Yeah, man, that's a scary situation right there, especially with that water coming in. Were you there the last time? Did you get affected a lot?
Hurricane Harvey, yeah, my gym took like
Mm.
6 feet of water, but we predicted it. We took everything out of the gym. Our mats were saved. So like we just had to kind of rebuild the interior of the building, which took like a month, and we were actually back in action pretty quick. I was actually in fight camp when that happened too, so I was a nomad for about 4 weeks of that 8 week camp. It was tough, but I found a way to train. Thankfully, I have a lot of cool relationships all around Houston, and then now that I'm training at Fortis up in Dallas, there's more training options than I have energy for. So it's nice to have that problem.
It seems like the Houston, Dallas area, is becoming a hotbed. Do you see this, even with the younger talent coming up in the area?
So I'll tell you, I have a theory on why Houston was so, even Texas was so like well adapted for MMA. It's because most states allow pro-ams, which is like pro fights and amateur fights on the same fight card. So they only have to pay out like 3 or 4 guys, which would allow promoters to throw fights more often. And in Texas, that was illegal. You either had all amateur cards or all professional cards. So when Legacy, run by Mick Maynard, who is now a UFC matchmaker, was coming up in like the 2010 to 2015 era, they had to have pro fight cards of 10 to 12 fights. So they needed 20 to 24 pro fighters. So the demand for pros was very high. So the mixed martial arts team was very developed in an early stage in Houston, and it's really carried over. If anything, there are fewer fighters professionally now than there were back in like the early 2010s. And a lot of those guys are coaches. Some of them made it to the UFC, one of my, myself included. And so now there's a lot of like, different younger fighters coming up in that aspect. And now that Legacy is more regional, Fury Fighting Championship has really picked up a lot of the fighters in shows in not only Texas now, but like Colorado and Louisiana. And it's awesome to see Fury doing really well. I hope they get a televised deal pretty soon and start to pick it up.
Don't you have a few guys at your gym that's coming up, prospects?
Yeah, so one of my guys, Cameron Graves, cross trains out of Team Tooks, and with Fortis and with myself, he just won the Fury 145 belt against a super tough young guy in Colin Wright. He got a TKO in the first round. My other guy, Jake Heffernan, he's 7-2 as a pro. He had some tough fights his last two, but he's doing well. And then we got a bunch of amateurs and some up and coming pros. So yeah, we've been staying very active as well.
No Contender Series in their future. It seems like a lot of guys, that's what their line to the UFC is like.
Yeah, so with Cameron Graves, we're looking to get one more win on like a local or regional scene. Then surely next summer we'll try to get him on the Contender. And then same with Jake, he's got to put a couple wins together at a higher level. And same thing. One of my other guys, Ricky, he actually went to Alpha Male the last, I think, like 3 or 4 years ago. But he's 9-2 as a pro, and he fought Boston Salmon on the Contender Series on actually the first year, or the first week, lost a decision, so he's working his way back up to it again. But yeah, it's fun. It's fun being a coach, and even more fun being a fighter, especially under safe at Fortis.
Definitely, man. Well, let's talk about your last fight against Zak Ottow. First round finish, your first knockout in the UFC. You basically predicted it the last time we talked. Was that the closest to a flawless victory you can have in the UFC?
Yeah, after the fight, the only thing that was sore was my elbow from elbowing him in the head so hard. But yeah, I wanted a standing knockout. I didn't think it would happen as easily with him because he was pretty wrestling heavy. But man, the training for that fight camp, that was the hardest I've ever trained. And I've had 35, 40 fights, including all my amateur fights and like my non-MMA fights. And I've never had a bad fight camp. I've always like over prepared before I've under prepared. And that was like my first real full fight camp at Fortis. And it was the hardest thing I'd ever done in my life. And it made the fight seem so much easier. And now that I understand that, going into this next fight camp is even better because I like know what to expect in training. I know the level I have to get to cardio wise, and it's just getting better and better.
That was your last fight on your second contract with the UFC. Was it pretty easy to get a deal done after that win?
Yeah, so I got signed for another 4 fight deal, and now I have Coach Safe also working with like all the managerial stuff. And managers in the past, I liked my last manager. But they, they want you to take fights so they can get, their percentage, and they want you to stay active. And Coach Safe wants me to take fights to win and to, better my career. So just from like a strategy standpoint and like a personal relationship standpoint, and he's the most profound, knowledgeable MMA coach I've ever met in my life. And not just with like fight knowledge, but like, with matchmaking and everything. And I've always been very proud of like my like strategic mindset and in my allegiances made in life, and to not you know allow Coach Safe to kind of guide me in that aspect, I think would have been a big mistake. And I've been very happy with the results so far.
Yeah, it's good to see that you found the perfect coach for you, not the best coach, that people think is the best coach.
Right. Yeah, my opinion is not particularly sought after when it comes to decision making in fights, which is great. I've been the head coach at my gym for a very long time, or earlier than I was hoping for, because our coach had left. And this was back in like 2012. And as much as I like being a coach and I love it, I like being a soldier. I like being like a warrior more. So it's nice to allow to have a general, and Safe is my general, and I follow orders and I get to go to battle, and that's what I wanted to do. So it's like best of both worlds.
After that last fight, you were going through some rehab. Could you divulge what was going on in that time?
Yeah, so if anything, it was great. I just had like a slight meniscus tear that I had been dealing with, and in training, it had just, I guess, torn more. I'm not too sure, and I'd felt it, but I still performed well. And then got the MRI, and I had a really close orthopedic surgeon doctor, and he was like, there's no sense to not do it, and got it done. And man, I didn't. I actually, it's every time I do it, I don't realize how limited I am until I get it fixed, and I feel what it's like to have that natural movement. And man, it's just so much better. And I just turned 29, and mobility wise, I'm significantly better off than I was over like the last few years, because I've gone through a couple different knee fixes, and man, feel really good. And I've really amped up my strength and conditioning. That was the first thing Safe had told me when I met him like 18, 19 months ago. He was like, you need to get bigger and stronger for welterweight, or else you're going to fight at 55. And I can't make 55, so I got bigger and stronger. So I'm 19 months into a very consistent strength and conditioning with a good friend of mine and student. He's a purple belt under me, a guy named Adam Latiti. He's a New Zealander. He played professional rugby in his past. And I work with him at a fight camp every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and in fight camp every Monday and Friday, and just feel tremendously more explosive and strong. And it's necessary, because the guys at Fortis have some crazy strength and conditioning. And just to compete with them, I gotta make sure to stay on that level.
It's been, around 7 months. How long have you been ready to fight?
So I fought in March, got the surgery done, and was out in early April. Since May, I've been in shape, and like weight wise, cardio wise, since May. So June, July, August, been all year. Also at the beginning of this year, I committed to I essentially do my fight camp diet year round now. And again, I do a lot of private lessons, like all the strength and conditioning, but I also do wrestling privates. And any time I come across a good grappler, I usually take private lessons from them, and I make sure to hit mitts religiously with my striking coach. So like this year was dedicated to like clean eating and very good technical training, plus the hard fight camp training. It's just gone so well, and I've stayed so much healthier. And I was hoping to fight more this year, but that's okay. I mean, the year's young. I'm fighting in October. Hopefully, fight again in December. But we'll see. I got a lot of cool things happening.
Yeah, you after that fight, you called for Diego Sanchez. Of course, you didn't get that fight, and there must have been names flying around, before you got this Max Griffin, fight lined up. What were the talks with the UFC?
So again, Dwight Grant was a good option. I still love that fight, but he was coming off of a bicep reattachment, and I understand that's a very daunting surgery. And then again, they offered Mickey Gall, but that didn't pull through. But I'll tell you, if this is my 9th fight in the UFC, I've probably been offered like 12 or 13 fights, of which I've accepted every single one of them. And a few of them obviously didn't pan out. But man, I had an eerie feeling I would fight Max Griffin. I think after watching his second fight in the UFC, for whatever reason, I had some intuition telling me that I was going to fight this guy. And so I've made sure to watch his fights ever since. And I actually kind of became like I would like root for him, especially when he fought that Russian guy last time. I know the Russian guy was being like pretty crazy on fight week, like threatening him and stuff. And I don't like when guys lose that respect aspect of martial arts. So I was really rooting for Max to win. And sure enough, he won that fight. It was a weird fight too. The Russian got a point taken away within like a minute. He threw a bunch of spinning attacks. I got to see a lot of Max's wrestling and grappling in that fight. And I have nothing but respect for the man, and I knew this fight was going to happen for whatever reason. So when Sean offered Max Griffin, I was not surprised and immediately accepted. And it's cool because Ryan Spann is also fighting on that card against Devin Clark, and he's another Fortis teammate, and it's always more fun having teammates on the fight card.
Do you feel that this fight, coming up in Tampa against Max, is like the perfect matchup for you at this point in your career?
Yeah, so I do believe this is my hardest fight in the UFC, and his record is not like indicative of his if in the UFC of his skill set. He has 4 losses against 4 tough dudes: Colby, Covington, Millender, the Brazilian Elizu, Zaleski dos Santos. I think I'm saying his name wrong, and then Thiago Alves. Other than Colby, he went to the distance with all those guys. He's got a notable win over Mike Perry. Max is solid. His UFC record doesn't quite show it. And so I'm taking this fight extraordinarily seriously and am very prepped for it. And yeah, on the Tapology rankings, I'm not too sure where he stands in the UFC, but he's ranked like 35 in the world at welterweight, and I'm at like 55. So a win over him will bump me up tremendously. And then I'm looking like top 30, beat one of those guys, top 20, beat one of those guys, top 15. Before I didn't care about the rankings, but in Dallas and Coach Safe's goal for us is to get us ranked high and get us big fights. And that's how it's going.
You mentioned earlier that now you're doing your diet year round. You're doing privates here and there. The balance of training seems to be working perfectly for you right now. What is the confidence level for you currently?
Again, better than ever. I was just talking to my wife the other day, and I was like, man, if I had to go train with or fight my younger self, I would beat the crap out of him. It was awesome. And my brother was asking, he was like, how are you still motivated to train this much, 13 years down the line? And I'm more motivated now than ever. Not only is like the more financial gains, but like with the skill set and with the eyes in the UFC and the stage set, there's just so much cool things to accomplish. And like rankings, cool. I'll focus on that later. But again, I want like cool highlight moves and techniques and finishes. And granted, it's very different opponent to opponent depending on their mannerisms and their stance and just their reactions. But I have some cool stuff planned for this fight. If there's no openings for the cool stuff, then whatever. I'll just stick to my guns, which is generally how it goes. But confidence is at an all-time high, and I don't really fight to prove anything. I fight because I enjoy the battle. I enjoy the emotion and the feeling of life in the octagon, and I've done it enough times to kind of craft the feeling to like no fear and all excitement. And again, I just get super excited before I fight, and even walking out, there's some butterflies, which is good. It's just your brain producing adrenaline so you can react quick. But it's more excitement and like blood rage than anything else. So I'm excited to fight again. It's been a little too long.
You mentioned earlier that you're just, with your coach, you're moving up the rankings. That's the purpose of fighting these fights. But when I look at it, it seems like two guys that are at the edge of the rankings, the top 15, facing each other. So whoever the winner is faces one of the guys in the top 15. Is that something that, is that the best case scenario for you?
So yeah, I think top 15 is a little ambitious, and I do understand, like, not necessarily the pecking order, but I understand like the way to move up. And I'll tell you, my main training partner at Fortis, Geoff Neal, he's I think ranked 16, so he'll be fighting a top 15 guy. And my main goal is like longevity in the UFC. So I don't quite focus on the rank that much. Like, the plan is to beat Max in a cool fashion for this fight. That's going to happen. And then I really don't care who they offer next. They can offer somebody who's ranked 70th or 80th, and I would likely still take that fight. Again, I'm looking for like octagon time and just like a reason to go to war. And that's it. That's my main goal now. If the rankings do get high in the future, then great, but that's not an immediate goal.
Yeah. You're at like the perfect age too. You're at, you're 29 years old. You've had a bunch of fights in the UFC already, and it almost seems like you're at your peak now, or you're at the beginning of your peak, and everything's working out perfectly. I want to talk about Geoff Neal a little bit because he's kind of like in the same situation, but his rise is a little bit quicker. A lot of people are high on him. How is it, being able to clash with him every day in training camp?
It's great. It sucks sometimes, but man, it's awesome. I'm not going to give away too much information just because he's just such a well-rounded fighter, and I just can't wait to see who he gets matched up with next. And he's 4-0 since his debut. The only person who's done that has been Usman, who's the champion. And I've actually known Geoff for a while. We fought in like the local Houston scene for a while. The first time I trained with him must have been back in like 2010 at Team Tooks. And it's just so great to see how well he's doing. And I'm so fortunate and thankful to have such a good training partner. And again, like on Tuesday we sparred very hard. I got my rounds in, and he was my last round, and just he puts it on me. And if I ever do well with him, I can do well with everybody in the UFC. And so that's the goal. And man, he's awesome. I'm just curious to see who he gets matched up with. I know I know they're looking for a good fight. Again, he's ranked 16th. I doubt he would fight anyone ranked below him. And read the top 15 guys, and they're all freaking bangers. So I'm just curious to see who it is.
All right, I'd like to pick your brain about some of the things that are happening in the welterweight division. You got this title fight that's supposed to happen. We actually talked about it last time, which is Covington versus Usman. It's not happening. It's happening. We don't know. The negotiations are not working out. What are your thoughts on this, like back and forth between these fighters in the UFC?
Dude, I think it's just Colby, man. Talk about a guy that's easy to dislike. I don't know. I'm very happy that Masvidal and Nate got the main event spot. I may be Masvidal's #1 fan. I've been studying tape on him forever. The way he can manage range and commit to his punches and his counter punches is phenomenal. I was really pulling for him to beat Ben Askren, and I had a bunch of people at my house, had a little party that night for those fights, and dude, he flying knees them. I like that he and Nate are getting pay-per-view points. They're getting MSG pay-per-view headline money. That's awesome. And if I'm not mistaken, I think Colby's management team had just asked for too much money, and the UFC told him to go F off. And I don't like the guy, so that's fine. I actually did grow to like Usman, but after he beat Woodley, I got a lot of respect for that man. His brother actually trains up in Dallas, big heavyweight guy, and I actually met Usman at Dallas recently, and so I'm kind of rooting for him in his next matchup. And then they announced Wonder Boy and Vicente Luque. That's a really fun fight. They just announced Lawler and Ponzinibbio. That's another awesome fight. Dude, this is a good time for the welterweights. But it sucks the champion's not fighting. But it's kind of funny that Colby got shafted like that, and now he's complaining and talking a bunch of crap about the UFC. There's nothing cooler than fighting the UFC. I would never say anything bad about him. And man, I love how much I'm getting paid from him. And it's cool. I'm happy Masvidal and Nate are getting that fight. That's a fight I'm really looking forward to.
Also, you got Colby like trashing his former best friend, Masvidal, and then now Masvidal is actually being rewarded by Colby's mistakes. And
Yeah.
In the gym, like America Top Team is a gigantic gym, so many fighters. Now there's a beef brewing there. Or maybe, I don't know, it could be publicity, I don't know. But could you ever see that happening anywhere, like especially at a gym that you train at?
No. So my gym is run on a very tight ship. I was just talking to one of my coaches who's like a no-nonsense coach, and any weirdos get weeded out instantly, and then no one would dare to do anything like that at Fortis. I don't think it's ever happened. It will never happen. Coach would never allow that to happen. So no, absolutely not. And man, he was also talking about Poirier. And then he was like talking smack to Stipe's wife. I just don't understand the guy. I really, really don't. It's very disheartening. And the only bad thing about it is I only want to see him fight because I want to see him get his ass kicked. And that is a draw kind of in itself, kind of like the Tito Ortiz effect. But no, respect is held at a very high standard at my gym and of course at Fortis. And no, that would never ever happen.
One last thing before I let you go, in MMA, fighters, competitors, there's many different types. What do you consider yourself at this point in your career? Do you consider yourself a martial artist or a prize fighter?
I think I live the lifestyle of a martial artist, running a martial arts gym, traveling around the world fighting. But I'll tell you, the main motivator for fighting is not money. If I wanted to make money, I would do something else, and I'm sure do fine. It's the thrill of the battle. There's no better way to feel alive than fighting in that octagon. And I've done it so many times now. I got almost 2 hours of fight time in the octagon. This is my 9th fight, plus all my old fights before that. I've just become extraordinarily comfortable in a seemingly very uncomfortable situation. And I know the risk, I know the reward, and call me crazy, but bleeding and getting hit, cracking dudes is just such a cool way to feel alive. So I don't know. I'm not too sure. The money's great. I mean, that's a big motivator for sure. But I remember fighting on the local scene for less than a tenth of the pay. and I was equally as happy doing it. So I'd say a martial artist, but kind of on the crazier side of enjoying the combat.
Well, we get to see you back into that cage, man. I'm happy that you finally get to step back in there. October 12th, UFC on ESPN Plus 19, Tampa, Florida. Thank you, Alex, man. Always good talking to you. Always good to be able to pick your brain, and good luck on the fight and your future, man.
Cool. Thank you so much.